Hey everyone, I'm Cheryl Crow, and I want to welcome you to this 11th Annual Summit of Students and Faculty dedicated to addressing and indeed solving the problem of global food insecurity. You are here to use your education to make a difference in the world because you care. We can no longer be complacent about human suffering when we know that we can make a difference. I hope that lesson is learned in your university studies and that you can learn from each other over the 2 days of this conference. As an alum of University of Missouri, I am proud to see that this 11th anniversary program of UFWH is being held at my alma mater, which has a proud history of addressing global food needs through its curriculum, research, and outreach. This university helped build a land-grant type university in India and provided assistance to U.S. development assistance in many countries. We deeply appreciate and salute Auburn University for its leadership in initiating the movement of American colleges and universities to take up the cause of global hunger. We can no longer tolerate the suffering of poor people in disadvantaged countries of the world when our university education provides the tools and knowledge to reduce starvation permanently by moving from poverty to promise, as the conference theme asserts. You, who are our future leaders and the responsible citizens, will make a difference in shaping public policy, providing the management and know-how for private businesses, government agencies, and non-governmental agencies, NGOs, to find solutions. I join with you in this effort and salute your commitment. You have my support and applause for your efforts.
Ending hunger is within our grasp. You are here because you care so much about this issue. And it is our hope when you go home, when you go back to campus, you are so energized that you cannot stop creating new and more interesting, more effective, more worthwhile projects to do to try to reach more people to end hunger. And whether that is in your own community or in the community of the world, you're here because you've already decided that you want to make a difference in that way. So as I talk through a few thoughts about what you might do, what we might do together, I first want to say thank you to Brady and Ann Deaton for the invitation to be here today. I so appreciate Brady's elegant leadership in the area of global hunger and global agriculture. And I know we all appreciate, and you've already heard from Brady and you'll hear again about the leadership of June Henton and her work to create this whole concept, and Harriet Giles, who's been so supportive of her. Now, a few of us in the room were here last night for a dinner at the President's house, and we got to hear John Sexton, and I don't know if John is here, so there he is, who was he's the president emeritus of NYU, and that is, as an earlier speaker said, I think at the other panel, one of the highlights of coming here, John. I have to tell you, however, and I'll explain this to the students in a few minutes, that although I was in 8th grade a few years after you, following your 8th grade story, I used to listen to baseball on the radio also, sitting in my bedroom, only my heroes were Elston Howard and Moose Skowron and Bobby Richardson and Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra. And but I promise I wouldn't have been part of the boys that were trying to beat you up because you had different heroes. I would have been cheering them on, though. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. I also have a couple of comments from Amir Abdullah, who is the deputy of the World Food Program, and he was hoping to join for part of this conference, but he was called away by an important meeting of the UN. And he said to please share some comments from Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who said that your generation is the first generation that can end poverty. And I will add to that, you also will be the first generation that can end hunger. In an earlier generation, President John F. Kennedy said, "We will end hunger in our lifetime." Now, there are many of us still here in that lifetime who can still work to do that. And that is especially true of the students on campus, because you can say with a lot of force, it is absolutely not acceptable that there are still Americans who don't have enough food to eat. You can say with a lot of force that you expect your public officials to do something about it, and that you will do something about it too with your own actions. You can insist that the government operates better in this area, and that economies are more able to help support those that are the poorest in their communities. And on world hunger, you can take advantage that the trends are all going in the right direction. You can jump on those trends and those activities to say, yes, and I'm going to do this, whatever this is, in order to make a difference. Some of you might remember the Billy Crystal movie, where he was a week-long cowboy, and City Slickers it was called. And there was an old cowboy in that movie that said, always remember one thing. There's just one thing. And he never described what the one thing was. But you know what? We all have that one thing. And my one thing may be different than Ken's one thing, and different than Brady's one thing, and different than your one thing. But that's one thing that we have, at least one thing, that we really care about, and where we can change the world. And hunger is certainly one of them. Now, the numbers of hungry people have decreased, also for the first time in history. According to Food and Agriculture Organization, the numbers of desperately hungry people in the world are now about 795 million. An unconscionable number for sure, but a lower number than ever before. Why? Primarily economic development. Primarily, people are becoming better off. But that also means that those 795 million people are even poorer, poorest of the poor. They're people who have almost no ability to be able to work their way out of poverty and hunger. And that is where we come in. But some of the reasons why they have been successful include education, that there are so many more children now in school. Still not all children in school. Still millions of children not in school. Still we have to work on issues of attendance in primary school. Still we have to work on issues of quality in primary school. And in a major way we have to be concerned about the transition from primary to secondary school. But we are making progress, and education is one key way to work oneself out of poverty. Then there's the issue of adequate nutrition. And you'll hear tomorrow from Roger Thoreau, who's just completed a book about the importance of the first 1,000 days of a person's life. The days in utero until age 2. How important nutrition is during that time in a person's life and how you can never make it up. If you or I or a student athlete here at the university are hungry for a month or a few months, we can make it up, as bad as that would be. But a child who's 1 year old can never make it up because that's when she's growing intellectually and physically, and she can't make it up again when she's 10. So he needs that food now. And some of the people who are most desperately hungry are the ones who, for generation after generation, the mother doesn't have enough to eat. And if the mother doesn't have enough to eat and she's a teenager and she has a baby, how is that baby going to become healthy from the very beginning? So it's that intergenerational poverty worldwide and hunger worldwide that we have to work on. Also, we have to consider that there's been progress in rural areas, and there has to be more progress in rural areas. We wrote a report about girls in rural economies with a lot of suggestions. At the Chicago Council, when we did this report, we said there's so many different things we can do in order to be sure that girls are more engaged, not because of their heavy workload, but that they're more engaged in the environment, they're more engaged in education, they're more engaged in helping to decrease the illiteracy of their mothers, for instance, because still there's the issue of girls who are less likely to be in school than boys. But these are all areas where there's been progress, and when there's progress, there's a decrease in hunger. So that's why I say the trends are moving in the right direction, and we have to push further and jump further in areas that are motivating to us in order to really try to make a big difference. And certainly gender is one of those areas as well. Recently I did a paper called Invisible Women and talked about the importance of reaching women and listening to women, because women are the cooks, women are the farmers, women are the ones that are most invested in their families and their families ending hunger. So let's think about their roles specifically as we look at efforts to end hunger. Now, the other piece of good news is that even though population is increasing, hunger is decreasing. So if you think about, even from 1970, when the world population was 3.7 billion, and now when it's 7.2 billion, there are less hungry people in the world. The trends are moving in the right direction, but they're still too high. But we've come together now in many different ways. We came together internationally with the Millennium Development Goals, which was the UN's effort. I'm sure everybody in this room, right, has heard of the Millennium Development Goals. When the UN came together, nations came together, civil society came together, NGOs, individuals, religious groups, others, and said, we can work together on different goals to decrease poverty. And ending hunger is one of those. And now, with the next generation, we're saying we can work for zero hunger by 2030. There is a ways to go. Now, some of you we'll look at this map where the worst in terms of percentages of hungry people, colors are purple, red, and orange, and there's no data for the grays, and say, well, the US isn't on there. No, even though there are many hungry people still here, it's a different scale, because when this map talks about hunger, it talks about people who absolutely have no food to be able to feed themselves, are struggling every day to try to have any food in order to feed themselves. So we know there's progress. We know where there's been some progress. We know where some of the major efforts are in order to make a change. And then we have to decide what we do. As Dr. Seuss, we may have read about once upon a time, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You have chosen hunger. And there's no limit, if that's the case, about where you can go. Absolutely no limit. You can change the world by your mid-30s. You can change the world and then go on and do something else, because you will have made sure that those numbers of hungry people are so much less. And I know from my own personal experience how important this time in your undergraduate or graduate careers are about making that commitment. And I'll tell you my story, I need my hand better, about being 18 years old on campus, being very involved in politics. And I was in the campus center, in the cafeteria, carrying my tray with my cheeseburger, French fries, and Coke on it, when I was verbally accosted by a guy in my class who said, "Kathy, how can you possibly be working for those awful candidates?" I don't even have to name names here. And I said, "Well, would you rather have me work for the other party?" "Oh, no, they're all corrupt. They're all terrible. This is terrible." And I said, no, I am going to make a difference. And I'm 18. I'm going to make a difference starting now. And my way is getting involved in politics. My way is getting involved in the system. Your way at the time, his way, was marching in anti-war marches, totally legitimate, different way. That's your way. My way is to get in the system and work my way into the system until I get to a place where I can make a difference. And he said, no. There's something really wrong with that kind of thinking. And I said, well, what's wrong with that kind of thinking? He said, because eventually you'll grow up and get married and have children, and you will have helped all of these yucky politicians, and then you'll forget about it and invest in your family, and you will have only helped the system, and you won't have been able to do anything in the system. And I said, that's where you're wrong. I may grow up and get married and have children. I don't know. But I do know that no matter what else I do, I am going to make a difference. So I stand here in front of you as somebody who now can say, I have. I have in various different ways that I won't recite. You can find it out. But I'm very proud of the fact that I started as a teenager and said, I can make a difference. It's like the British-Irish philosopher Edmund Burke, who said, all that is necessary for the forces of evil to win in the world is for enough good men to do nothing. I'm not going to be one of those people doing nothing. And obviously, since you're here, neither are you. So, what can be done? Number one, lead. Now, this is for the college presidents and the college administrators in the room, but it's also for the students in the room, too. Now, I know as president of a university or chancellor of a university, you're not the president of the United States. But I took two of them for an example because I think the examples are quite relevant. When George Herbert Walker Bush was nominated by his party for president of the United States, he said in his convention address, I believe in a kinder, gentler nation. Well, what did that mean? Once he was elected, that meant to people like me, I was assistant secretary at U.S. Department of Agriculture, running the domestic food programs, food stamps, SNAP, school lunch, WIC, and other programs. That meant something to me. That was my marching order from the President of the United States, whom I served, about how I should work on those kind of programs. It meant something to everybody throughout his administration, that kind of direction. It doesn't take much. And when President Obama, in his inaugural address, said to poor people in poor countries, to people of poor nations, we pledge to work alongside you to make your farms flourish, to nourish starved bodies and feed hungry minds. And so, the Secretary of State put together a 7-point plan for agriculture development. The administrator of USDA put together Feed the Future. Because the message came from on high, that's what I expect. So all the president or the chancellor has to do is say, these are the 3 things that are important to me in my administration, in my time on this campus. And then, you know what? Resources flow. People that are wanting to do what the president wants them to do will do something. Some people will snort at it, of course, but you will motivate a whole lot of people to be really helpful, including students who will know that there's a voice at the top of the university who can actually do some work for them and support them in their activities. So it's for everyone. You can do it as a public official, and I had to put up, and there's even people here from Dakota Wesleyan University. I had to put up this picture from their university, from the McGovern Center of George McGovern and Bob Dole. And if you don't know it, these 2 people were very distinguished U.S. senators, different parties, worked together very closely on domestic food assistance, on food stamps and school lunch and other programs, and then worked together internationally on school feeding, and are 2 more of the laureates of the World Food Prize. And Boutros Boutros-Ghali, who, may he rest in peace, just died last week, was Secretary General of the United Nations. I had the honor of working for him and working for Kofi Annan, also, who was totally fabulous. But Boutros Boutros-Ghali is an example of what I'm going to tell you about in a minute, of doing the right thing and sticking up for his principles in that process. And that included looking at programs like humanitarian action within the UN and trying to create it, as well as strengthen those programs. And especially to the students, I want to say, do the right thing, even if it's difficult. Stand up for hunger on your campus, even if other people aren't doing the same thing. This is a picture of me when I was in North Korea, and the first time I went there, because there was desperate hunger in North Korea, I had no idea how anybody would react. And when I came out and had a big press conference in Beijing and said, there's a real problem here and we need a lot of food in order to stop starvation in North Korea, I thought, I didn't have any idea about how anyone was going to react to that in any government. And reporters said things like, well, why should we support that government? And I said, you know, there was a president of my country one time, Ronald Reagan, who said, a hungry child knows no politics. It's not up to us to decide whether or not we like the government here. It's up to us to keep children alive, and that is what our mission is. I felt like that was doing the right thing, even if it meant some negative consequence, which in that case, it fortunately did not. And John Sexton did the right thing when he was in 8th grade and boys were beating him up because they didn't like his baseball team. You know what? He could have ducked. And he could have said, oh, no, yeah, you're right. But he got beat up because he was doing the right thing for him. And what's the right thing for him is for him. Might not be the right thing for me, but he can live his whole life and this many years later tell us the story proudly about it because he knows he did the right thing, even if there were negative consequences, in this case, getting beat up by 8th graders. Second thing after leading is to choose a mission. Choose a mission. This is such a complicated topic. There are so many different aspects of it. I don't think we can leave and say, okay, I'm going to go out and hunger. Okay, what piece of it are we going to take on? And it doesn't have to be one of these pieces on this chart. These are just a few suggestions. But taking a piece that you can actually cut off, that you can bite into, that you can actually have an impact on, whether it's working for education, whether it's working on gender mainstreaming, helping to create more effective extension systems in the developing world, working on the 1,000 days nutrition programs, enhancing research, a hugely important issue and effort, working to support your local food banks or your local food banking network and its outreach, working on food assistance in crisis. There are so many different options that it really can it is important to be able to pick which one is important to you. What was important to me and what I had the honor of doing is to working with the World Food Program and helping to feed people in the developing world. And what I've done since I don't do that for my job anymore. And by the way, I remember Raj Shah, the former administrator of AID, saying the best job in the world is something that doesn't even seem like a job. You know, I think really lucky if you get a job when you get out of school that is your passion. And then it's not a job. Well, it's kind of a nice benefit that somebody pays you for it. But now what I've done, what I did with the prize from the World Food Prize, was to invest in educating girls. Because for me, I decided that's the most important thing to do, to help provide assistance to projects in developing world to help more girls go to school. Organize, organize, organize. Pretend it's a political campaign. Now, I have to give Auburn a plug here. I took this off your website because they started this whole war against hunger on their campus. And I was so impressed when I first went there some years ago to see how they were organized, because they had somebody in each school, a student at the law school and the architecture school and the ag school and the Department of Economics, every place else. They had a student whose job it was to reach out and be creative with their faculties and with their students about work to end hunger. And it reminded me of being involved in politics way back when I was 18. And we wanted to support a presidential candidate. And we asked, would he come to our campus? And they said, well, yeah, maybe. So we organized just in case he came to the campus. And we had somebody in charge of each group of dorms, and somebody in charge of each dorm in the group of dorms, and somebody in charge of commuters from the north and the south, the west, the east. And when we got 36 hours notice that our candidate was coming to campus, he couldn't get to the room that we had set aside for him because there were too many screaming students outside waiting to see him. Now, that's politics, but it's also what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're going to have a rally every day for hunger, but you can organize for hunger all throughout the campus and have it be a really exciting, life-changing experience for yourself about how to put something together. 4, build a lasting program. That's the worst part of this kind of thing on campus, right? Is wherever you're from, whatever year you're in, and the seniors leave, and then what? Well, athletic directors have this issue all the time, right? Political organizers have this issue. We have this issue too, as far as hunger is concerned. So this comes back to the administration to find ways to build in systems where the hunger work can keep going as the students flow through, by assigning someone in the administration to work on it, by having courses that are coursework related, and perhaps having minors or majors in this field, by organizing student groups and giving them the proper, whatever the university needs to say, this student group is acceptable group. Everybody's got a different bureaucracy for that. But you can make those things as institutional as possible. So the question isn't, shall we have a student group working against hunger, but who's the leader this year for the student group working against hunger? And of course, working with local partners, especially on domestic hunger issues, is critically important, and I think internships are as well too, and they're not all that difficult to organize. 5, grab other opportunities. You know, somebody's coming to campus. Look at how great that was to hear Sheryl Crow, an alum of this university, be able to speak to us on that videotape. But so often there's somebody that comes, whether it's somebody to give a concert or somebody to make a speech, somebody that people going to listen to would not have the foggiest notion they care about hunger issues, but all of a sudden, when they endorse what you're doing on campus, it really makes a difference and potentially pulls more people into this whole operation. One thing I found when I was at the World Food Program is, especially on American campuses, the diaspora was really important. During the drought in Ethiopia, we found Ethiopian students we never knew existed all throughout the nation who wanted to work on raising money for Ethiopia. The North Korean famine, we found Korean students or students of Korean extraction all throughout the country who wanted to work to help raise money to work in that area. We all have local elected officials who like to come. Wouldn't it be great if they came to some hunger events and you found and that was a vehicle to find other ways for getting support from them for this as well. And then, although we concentrate on the local media, and the media in the school, in the town where we exist as a university, if we have some crackerjack journalism students like you have here, maybe they could be assigned to write feature stories about the students active in hunger to send to their hometown paper. Look at what Sally Jones is doing when she's at the university, and she's really having an impact. As Dr. Seuss says, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. I emphasize, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. Not everyone can, because the woman living in desperate poverty with a leaky grass hut roof and a husband not there, a woman who can't read and can't count, who has multiple children and has to scrape her way through every day to find enough food to be able to feed her family, and usually can't, who doesn't have real access to medical care, who doesn't know what's going to happen the next day or the next week or the next month. She cannot go wherever she chooses. But if she has some more education, if her daughter or her son can go to school, if she has some other economic opportunities, and even on the short term, if somebody's helping her to feed her, then eventually she also can steer herself. Now, I used to say that my grandmother told me, "There but for the grace of God go I," till I checked out the quote and found it really was said by somebody named John Bradford in 16th century England. That's how smart my grandmother was. But that motivates me. We all have a different motivation. But when I think about that woman I just described, I think that could be me. If I didn't have that chance to go to college, if I didn't have, by luck, the opportunity to be born to Americans in a small town in this country, I could be there. That could be me. And that's what motivates me. Because I say to myself, if that were me, is there anyone who will help me? Even if I don't know I'm poor, even if I don't know about other opportunities, is there anyone? Because I don't want to be hungry. I don't want to be dependent. I want to be able to feed my family, and I want them to be safe. So if I take myself back to me, I say, I can do something about that. My job, my mission, my vocation, my reason for being on this earth is to help other people in those situations. What's yours? Where will you go? What are you going to do? How many lives can you touch? I don't think there's a limit. Amir Abdullah said that the Secretary General said that last year was the year of global action. So this year should be the year of global traction. And we must get started on the global agenda to end hunger. I think we're already started. You've already started. But he said traction starts when universities and university students rise up and say, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to take this world the way it is anymore. We are going to change it. We are going to be sure that in our one future, in our future in this world, in which we are living together with billions of other people, our age, younger age, older age, we are going to make a difference. You can change the world because ending hunger is in our grasp. Thank you.